When the original Half-Life was unleashed upon the world on November 19th, 1998, I simply wasn't there yet to experience it. In fact, the first chance I got to accustom myself with this franchise was long after the second installment and its episodes. The year was 2013, and I was about to play Black Mesa for the first time in my life. Many times across my life I felt like I was born too late, like I don't belong to this generation. It got to the point that I even feel stupid for missing on the brilliant things of past decades, such as Half-Life when it first released. When I first played Black Mesa, I haven't played any Half-Life game beforehand. Many hardcore fans may condemn me for this, but as a 13-year-old boy who cared for the game's graphics probably more than the immersion itself, Black Mesa was an obvious choice for me when it came to starting my journey with this franchise. I acknowledged Half-Life's existence mainly because of Portal. I absolutely adored both of the Portal games, and learning that Half-Life's story takes place in the same universe, I desperately wanted to try it. Well, saying a few sentences before that, while being a 13-year-old boy I cared only about graphics was a huge overstatement. Although I chose Black Mesa over Half-Life 1 thinking that it's basically the same thing but with, well, updated graphics. And honestly, I couldn't be more wrong. Now that I have played all of the official Half-Life games along with few unofficial ones, I can say without a doubt that Black Mesa greatly surpasses in terms of gameplay and immersion both Half-Life 1 and Half-Life 2. And I know how ridiculous it may sound, I wasn't really sure of this statement either. That is up to the point when Black Mesa devs finally released their revamped version of Zen, commonly regarded as the worst chapters of Half-Life. And this time around, they're absolutely fucking amazing. A lot of time and passion went into completely reimagining these tedious and ugly portions of Half-Life, bringing back concepts lost through the development process such as Xenian swamps and further developing the Vortigern enslavement, as well as bringing new and fresh ideas without breaking the tone and overall feel of Zen too much. Well, I said too much because Black Mesa Zen is breaking the tone a bit, but in a surprisingly good manner. Half-Life's world, as brilliant as it was, momentarily felt too surreal and even unbelievable. Yes, you felt like you were on the ultimate adventure, yes, you felt the eeriness of Black Mesa's corridors, but once every time so often there was something that just didn't feel right. The way that world, mainly outside, but as well sometimes inside of Black Mesa research facility, had been designed felt unnatural and unrealistic at times. This is one of the Half-Life's issues that Black Mesa nearly completely fixed. Half-Life had an excellent skeleton for a nearly perfect game, and it utilized it brilliantly for the time when it was first released. But with time, those who were not blinded by nostalgia and fond memories saw that it also had flaws and unused potential. Most of these mistakes and unused potential came with the last few chapters taking place in the dimensional border world named Zen. Even the big boy himself, Gabe Newell, in an interview said this.
I think Zen was just a big disappointment. Like what we wanted to do versus what we were able to actually do. Right? A
lot of that was function of time.
Yeah. It was always a function of time.
Valve had ambitions and great plans for Zen. They just didn't have time and technology to develop it into something that would actually please them. This was one of the many reasons why I was so excited about Crowbar Collective's take on these chapters, as they had plenty of time and technology powerful enough to deliver the otherworldly experience that we needed and deserved. The Zen that Valve themselves would have been proud of. Probably as everyone, I was a tiny bit disappointed that the retail version of Black Mesa, which shipped in 2015, didn't include Zen. I knew, however, that it will probably be worth waiting additional year or two as they initially promised. However, I did not know that it will be almost 5 fucking years of waiting instead. Which actually should have been expected, taking into consideration how the development process looked up to this point. Anyway, Zen got fully released on 6th of December 2019, or 7th, depending on the time zone you live in. And by fully released, I mean all chapters in playable state, as it's still in beta full of minor bugs and glitches, as well as stuff to be potentially changed thanks to community feedback. Entering New Zen looks and feels completely different, yet oddly familiar. You look into the distance and see the strange and disturbing floating island. You know exactly what awaits you there, and more or less, you know how you get there. I cannot possibly imagine how it must feel to enter this place as someone who never played original Zen before, and I honestly envy those who will have this Zen experience as their first. Some may argue that Black Mesa didn't quite capture the feeling of original Half-Life, especially with Zen being vastly different from its 1998 counterpart. And that's why it's basically a crime to have this as a first Half-Life experience. Yes, I agree, there are major differences. It seems that this time around the game's composer Joel Nielsen got pretty obsessed with women humming and screaming vocally. Or however you call it. It seems I'm not educated well enough in this regard. But the new Zen is also considerably more rocky and less flashy or organic. There's less unforgivable platforming in the beginning, it's longer, prettier, more enjoyable and overall, just better. Well, this is objectively worse than this. I briefly mentioned before believability of the Half-Life universe and how it's flawed at times, the most notably here in Zen. The original border world didn't feel like a place that could actually exist, and this is not something that Valve was not aware of. There are plans for more Xenian flora and fauna for more believable locations, but these plans were never brought into reality. New Zen, even if still surreal and almost magical in its design, with all of its plant life and full of places actually possible to navigate by alien animals, is just more believable overall, which helps the immersion instead of breaking it. The question that came into my mind almost immediately after leaving Nyaland's chamber is how do these new Zen chapters actually compare to the Earthbound levels? And by Earthbound levels, I do not mean the game Earthbound, just the chapters from Black Mesa that still take place on Earth. It's no mystery that Zen chapters are significantly worse than the ones taking place inside the facility in original Half-Life, but is it the same with Black Mesa? With all certainty, I can say that this time around, yeah, still, they are still worse, but not as drastically as in Half-Life. As much as I love the new Zen and how much fun I had while playing through it, I still believe that the Earthbound levels are just better. Not all of them this time, but vast majority. There is just some kind of unique feeling about being stranded in a complex science facility that's falling apart, and no matter how amazing Zen turned out, you just cannot capture this feeling again. And that may be the case of why the Half-Life Zen is so universally disliked. It's a 180 degrees change in terms of atmosphere, plus the technical and graphical restraints to what Valve actually tried to accomplish. As of Black Mesa Zen, as I said, in my opinion, it's still tiny bit worse than the Airbound sections, probably due to its drastically different atmosphere, but mostly due to how unbalanced it is in few segments. And as the segments go, let's discuss them briefly one by one, starting from the obvious. Zen is probably the least similar to its 1998 counterpart. With every other chapter there are at least few factors that make you feel it's in some way still the same thing. Be it the color palette, some scripted sequence, the level design itself. While here, everything except this thing, and sort of the design of this island, everything is pretty much different. And that's not a bad thing, as Zen chapters were just, let's say, not the best Half-Life had to offer. Here we can have a look at Xenian Swamps, something that was a concept for original Zen, making it into Half-Life only as a short cameo at the beginning. We can see all the new exciting Xenian flora, which we almost didn't see at all in Half-Life. Also, another brilliant idea was showing human researcher outposts contrasting to just few HEV corpses placed randomly in Half-Life. And as for HEV, there are now HEV zombies, which are super cool and super terrifying. New animals are also making appearance, such as 2 new Hyundai variants and a cute floating cloud of particles. Worth mentioning is also addition of the power crystals that charge up our HEV energy. The best thing about these new additions is the fact that none of them feel out of place. They just improve your experience and help you immerse yourself in this world. Remember the simple puzzle when you had to free some flying creatures and turn on 3 things to activate the portal to the Ganoch layer? Now it involves some Vortigon technology, which, in my opinion, makes much more sense than the butterflies. Everything here is generally more believable, and I could describe how much I just love the new things on this chapter, but I think it's time to move into the lair. Due to transition between Zen and lair being more grand and technology oriented, while firstly walking upon the Crystal Wasteland, which is apparently how Krober Collective had imagined Gonard's lair to look like, we feel even more uncertain. Or should I just say uncertain, because I do not remember any feelings arousing in me when I first entered the lair in Half-Life. This was just the second map of Zen. I didn't really know what to expect yet, so I entered the portal without any real thoughts or feelings in mind. Here, however, it was quite different. Uncertainty and feeling that something dangerous and incredibly powerful awaits me here. I wouldn't know yet what this is if I haven't played Half-Life Zen before. But now I recognize the colors, the battlefield, the ongoing chase. What I don't know yet is who's exactly going to be chased. I love New Gunarch Slayer, probably the most of all the redesigned chapters due to how interesting the whole sequence is now. How we're not always pursuing the Gunarch, stopping here and there for quick battle encounters and then chasing it again till it reaches dead end. Now we don't always feel like a hunter, we feel like a prey at times. Gunarch this time around is much more aggressive, has more interesting encounters and feels like a proper threat that needs to be dealt with, not an obstacle that I like to skip. The environment design has improved horrendously. Playing with fire throughout the levels had been a welcomed addition. The multum of web-like structures covering walls and floors of caverns and other signs of something actually living there make the environment much more believable. The final sequence also has more impact, with all its epic music for last fight and later seeing how Gunarch pathetically crawls, desperately trying to kill us to protect its children. You feel like a monster for finally putting it down. Let me get this out of the way rather quickly. I absolutely hate the original Interloper. I feel it definitely deserves to be called the worst chapter of Half-Life, and I believe many of you may agree. Interloper was always the ugly, boring and filled with the most annoying platforming and fight sequences of all of Half-Life. And I believe it is the main reason why Zen is disliked so much overall. That may be due to it being the lengthiest chapter of all of the otherworldly ones. And it's all a shame, because Interloper seemed to have some interesting ideas that were just barely scratched upon in the original. I'm more than happy to say that thematically these ideas were further developed in the Interloper that Crowbar Collective provided. Showing the Vortigaunt's more clearly as mere slaves living in some kind of slums was a brilliant way to start the chapter. Showing their oppressors, the controllers, and the alien grunts which they are forced to create in now still alien looking but much more refined and believable factory sections, is all visually impressive and immersive. I do really like the new Interloper, but I can't say that I love it, as I did with the previous chapters. I guess there may be some kind of curse to these sections that will always make it quite annoying to beat. This time around, annoyance came directly from the gameplay. But don't get me wrong, from the gameplay perspective, the new Interloper utilized many new exciting ideas and improved on flawed aspects the chapter was known for before. So, what exactly went wrong? Possibly lack of playtesting made the sections incredibly painful to play. I believe it has been resolved as of me editing this video, but I won't have time to replay the whole chapter to confirm if anything really improved, so I'll leave my comment about partial lack of balance and fun in some parts of the chapter here in my review. But other than few, in my opinion, broken sections, New Interloper feels and looks amazing. You can see a lot of environmental storytelling, which I always adore in games. Increasingly difficult encounters, alien forces desperately trying to stop us as we wreak havoc in strange facility, hint that there is even greater force to be reckoned with. Entering the Nihilant's chamber yet again, but actually for the first time in this way, felt absolutely stunning. I didn't know what to fully expect, and honestly I got pretty confused with this whole shield thing not disappearing fully after I destroyed the power crystals, and I got stuck there for a few minutes before I realized that I can damage the shield with bullets, rockets, bolts, glue-on, anything that does damage pretty much. But other than small misunderstanding, this fight was probably one of the best, if not the best and most satisfying boss fights I ever played. Well, maybe I didn't play enough boss fights then, but this was absolutely amazing. Gone were the unnecessary enemy spawns and teleports into random locations to distract us, giant floating fetus this time actually felt powerful and threatening enough on its own, and the last phase of the battle felt really scary and immersed me more than ever into this world. I had to stop it, and I did. I had not though predicted the unforeseen consequences. Well, that's totally not true. I knew exactly what was going to happen. Nylon dies, Jimon takes me away, I can accept or refuse his offer. As we all know, only accepting is canonically confirmed, not taking into consideration the multiverse introduced in Portal 2. But let's not get too distracted. It's actually the end of Black Mesa. It was a bit funny to hear G-Man being voiced by the same guy as the security guards, but it makes sense considering Michael Shapiro did the same thing in original Half-Life. Maybe they wanted to stay faithful in this regard. Either way, Kevin Sisk, because I believe it was him, did a decent G-Man impression. The thing I love the most about the ending, however, is the materialization and dematerialization of the tram, and how they incorporated the G-Man speech style from Half-Life 2. Well, I believe I said enough. I could still overanalyze other parts of this game, the Earthbound sections, the Zen aspects I didn't discuss yet, but what's the point? It wouldn't fully describe a feeling that we can get while living through this adventure ourselves. As I mentioned, Black Mesa is a game really close to my heart, and as it seems, analyzing its contents led to me creating possibly the longest video on this channel so far. The love and passion for the Half-Life franchise it started helped me create many more great things. Just as Valve, with showing Half-Life to the world, inspired Crowbar Collective to perfect this experience to an unimaginable level of quality and give it so much love and dedication. This is exactly how creators of Black Mesa inspired me in many ways. And so, with this thought in mind, I leave you all, Gordons and Gertrudas. Be wise, be safe, be aware.